It was October 15th, 2023. I remember the date because it was the day after my 50th birthday, which I'd spent closing a deal in Chicago. I'd been away for 4 days, a standard trip for my project management role. Tired but satisfied with the successful contract negotiation, I walked into my house around 9 p.m. expecting the usual comfortable chaos, kids arguing over homework, Sarah maybe finishing dinner cleanup or watching TV. Instead, I found silence. Not just quiet, but an unnerving, hollow silence that felt fundamentally wrong. The air was still. The usual clutter of school bags, shoes, and jackets by the door was gone. I called out, "Sarah? Emily? David? I'm home." Nothing. Just the echo of my own voice in the empty foyer. A cold knot began to tighten in my stomach. I walked through the downstairs rooms. Living room, dining room, kitchen, all eerily tidy, stripped of the personal touches that made it home. No photos on the mantelpiece. No kids' artwork stuck to the fridge. Upstairs, the dread intensified. Our bedroom closet was half empty, all of Sarah's clothes gone. The kids' rooms were the same, beds neatly made, but closets and drawers bare. It looked like they'd packed methodically, purposefully. Panic started to set in. I grabbed my phone, dialing Sarah's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried Emily, then David. Voicemail. Voicemail. I sent texts. "Where are you? Is everything okay? Please call me." No response. I logged into our joint online banking portal, thinking maybe there was an emergency, a sudden trip. That's when the floor truly dropped out from beneath me. The joint checking account balanced $17.38. The joint savings account, the one holding our emergency fund and a down payment we were saving for a small rental property, balanced $0. Transaction history showed a series of large transfers over the past 3 days, culminating in a final withdrawal that morning, emptying everything. Nearly $85,000 gone. My personal savings account, linked for overdraft protection, had also been hit, drained down to the last few $100s. My salary had been direct deposited just 2 days prior. She'd taken that too. I felt dizzy, leaning against the doorframe of the empty bedroom. It wasn't an emergency trip. This was calculated. This was abandonment. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. After 20 years of marriage, she had vanished with our children and financially gutted me while I was away working for our family. On the perfectly made bed where Sarah should have been lay a single white envelope. My name, Mark, was written on it in her familiar cursive script. Inside wasn't a letter full of explanation or remorse. It was a copy of a divorce petition already filed with the county court. And nestled within the legalese were accusations that made my blood run cold, claims of emotional neglect, verbal abuse, financial control, asserting I was an unfit parent. She was seeking sole custody and demanding alimony and child support that, given my now non-existent finances, seemed designed to crush me utterly. She hadn't just left, she had declared war, leaving me disarmed and bankrupt on the battlefield she'd created in secret. In that moment of shock and devastation, standing alone in the shell of my home, a strange calm washed over the initial panic. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought leaving me penniless and smeared with false allegations would make me fold. She didn't know me at all. 20 years. We'd met in our late 20s. I was a junior software developer then, ambitious but awkward. Sarah worked in marketing for a different company in the same building. She was bright, funny, seemed down to earth. We dated for 2 years before getting married. Our life together felt like the blueprint for stable, middle-class contentment. We bought the house in a quiet suburban neighborhood with good schools. I climbed the ladder in the tech world, eventually moving into project management, which provided a comfortable income. Sarah continued working for a few years after Emily was born, but when David arrived 2 years later, we decided together that she would stay home with the kids. It made sense financially at the time, and honestly, she seemed happy with the arrangement. I never pressured her. It felt like a mutual decision for the family's benefit. I wasn't a flashy husband, maybe not the most overtly romantic, but I believed I was a good partner and father. I worked hard, often long hours, especially when deadlines loomed or travel was required, but I did it for them. For us. I wanted to provide a secure, comfortable life, give the kids opportunities, build a future. Evenings and weekends were family time. I coached David's little league team for years. I helped Emily with her math homework even when calculus started stretching my own abilities. We had family dinners most nights, took summer vacations, camping trips when the kids were younger, later a memorable week at Disney World, a cruise to the Caribbean. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had savings, retirement accounts growing steadily, college funds for the kids. I handled the main finances, paying bills, managing investments, simply because I was more inclined towards numbers and planning, but Sarah had full access to the joint accounts, credit cards in her name. There was never a question of my money versus her money. It was always our money. I trusted her implicitly. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in life for 2 decades. We had disagreements, of course, like any couple. Sometimes about parenting styles, sometimes about household chores, occasionally about money. Maybe she felt we should splurge more while I leaned towards saving. But they were normal marital friction, discussions we usually resolved. There were never screaming matches, never threats, certainly never anything close to the abuse she was now alleging in court documents. Looking back, searching for clues I missed, I see only the steady rhythm of a life built together. Birthday parties, school plays, holiday gatherings with extended family. Me fixing the leaky faucet or mowing the lawn on a Saturday. Sarah managing the household, volunteering at the kids' school, coordinating social calendars. It felt solid, dependable. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe it became too dependable, too routine for her. But for me, that stability was the goal, the foundation upon which everything else rested. I thought we were building something lasting, something safe. The idea that she could harbor such resentment, plan such a devastating exit while smiling at me across the dinner table, it was inconceivable. It wasn't just the money or the house, it was the shattering of 20 years of shared history, the realization that the life I believed in might have been a facade, at least for her, for God knows how long. The signs were there, of course. They always are, aren't they? You just don't see them, or perhaps you choose not to. Hindsight illuminates everything with a harsh, unforgiving light. Thinking back over the year before she left, subtle shifts began to register, like background noise you only notice when it stops. Around the spring of 2023, maybe 6 months before the end, Sarah started becoming more private. She'd always been sociable, but she began spending more time on her phone, often angling the screen away if I walked into the room. Sometimes I'd hear her talking softly, ending the call quickly if I entered. When I asked who it was always just a friend or someone from the PDA. Plausible excuses. She also became more critical of me, not in major blow-ups, but through small, persistent jabs. Comments about my clothes, my job demanding too much time, how I didn't understand her anymore. I chalked it up to stress, maybe a midlife slump, the challenges of raising teenagers. I tried to be more attentive, suggested date nights, which were often met with excuses, offered to take things off her plate. She'd usually brush it off, saying she was fine, just tired. Then there was the spending. Small things at first, more online shopping, packages arriving, lunches out with friends that seemed more frequent. I noticed a few charges on the joint credit card statement that seemed slightly out of character, higher-end stores she didn't usually frequent. When I gently inquired, she became defensive. Can't I buy myself something nice once in a while? You track every penny, don't you? That stung because I didn't think I did. I managed the finances, yes, but I never restricted her spending. Trust was the bedrock. Her defensiveness, however, made me uneasy. It wasn't like her. Around August, she started talking vaguely about wanting change, about feeling unfulfilled. She mentioned wanting to perhaps go back to work part-time or take some classes. I was fully supportive. I encouraged her, offered to help research options, adjust household budgets if needed. But she never took concrete steps. It was just talk, sighs, and a growing sense of distance. There was also a new friend she mentioned occasionally, someone named Greg from a yoga class she'd recently joined. She described him casually, just another person in the group. Nothing seemed amiss. The most significant red flag, the one I truly kicked myself for downplaying, occurred about a month before she left. We received a notice about refinancing our mortgage. I was reviewing the paperwork and noticed Sarah seemed unusually interested, asking specific questions about equity, loan amounts, how quickly a refinance could be processed. At the time, I thought she was just taking a more active interest in our finances, something I'd occasionally wished she'd do. I explained the process, the numbers. Looking back, she wasn't just interested, she was gathering intelligence. My own analytical nature, the tendency to see patterns, started whispering warnings. Little inconsistencies. The timeline of a girl's weekend that didn't quite add up. Her phone being suddenly password protected when it never was before. The slight coolness from the kids, Emily especially, which I attributed to typical teenage moodiness. I remember feeling a persistent, low-level anxiety, a sense that something was off-kilter. But I pushed it down. Fear, perhaps? Denial? The sheer magnitude of doubting the foundation of my life felt overwhelming. It was easier to believe things were fundamentally okay, that these were just bumps in the road of a long marriage. The alternative, that my wife was actively deceiving me, planning to dismantle our life, was too monstrous to contemplate. Until, of course, I returned from Chicago to find it wasn't a fear, but a meticulously executed reality. The divorce petition was brutal. Beyond the false allegations of abuse and neglect, it painted me as a controlling tyrant who kept Sarah financially trapped. It demanded sole physical and legal custody of Emily and David, citing my volatile temper and emotional unavailability as reasons they wouldn't be safe or properly cared for with me. It requested substantial alimony based on my historical income and maximum child support, plus exclusive use of the marital home, which she had, of course, already vacated and left me in. It was a work of fiction designed to inflict maximum damage and secure maximum payout. The initial shock gave way to cold clarity. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision fueled by unhappiness. This was a premeditated strike. Emptying the accounts, timing it with my business trip, coordinating the move, filing the petition immediately, it reeked of planning, likely with legal advice obtained well in advance. And probably with the help of Greg. The first thing I did after confirming the financial devastation was call my bank's fraud department. I explained the situation, the unauthorized clearing of joint accounts while I was documented as being out of state. They were sympathetic but explained that since she was a joint account holder, it wasn't technically fraud in the criminal sense. It was a civil matter, something to be addressed in the divorce. However, they did provide detailed statements showing the exact times and methods of the transfers and withdrawals, crucial documentation for later. My next call was to find a lawyer. I didn't want the most aggressive shark. I wanted someone smart, strategic, and experienced in complex divorces involving financial disputes and false allegations. Through a recommendation from a colleague who'd gone through a nasty split years ago, I found Mr. Robert Harrison. Our first meeting was 2 days after Sarah left on October 17th. I walked into his office feeling numb but resolute. I laid out the facts calmly, the 20-year marriage, the sudden departure, the empty accounts, the kids taken without consent, the divorce petition filled with lies. I provided the bank statements, the copy of the petition, the dates of my business trip confirmed by travel records and work emails. Mr. Harrison listened patiently, his expression unreadable but attentive. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Mr. Evans," he said, his voice calm but firm, "this is what we call a scorched earth tactic. Your wife, likely advised by her counsel or perhaps her new partner, decided to hit you preemptively and hard, assuming you'd be too financially and emotionally crippled to fight back effectively. Our job is to prove her actions were premeditated, her allegations false, and her financial claims based on deliberately misrepresented circumstances." He outlined the strategy. First, immediate counterfilings. Respond to the divorce petition denying all allegations point by point. File motions for temporary orders regarding custody, visitation, and financial support requesting an emergency hearing. Demand a forensic accounting of all marital assets, including the funds Sarah had taken. Seek discovery requesting financial records, communications, anything related to her departure and new living situation. The key Mr. Harrison emphasized is documentation and calm persistence. We won't sling mud, but we will meticulously dismantle her narrative with facts. That resonated with my project manager brain. Define the problem, gather the data, build the case, execute the plan. Over the next few weeks, while staying at a budget motel because I couldn't afford anything else and the house felt haunted, I became an investigator in my own life. Mr. Harrison handled the legal filings, but I dove into gathering evidence. I accessed old cloud backups Sarah might have forgotten, searching for deleted emails or messages legally, focusing on accounts I had legitimate access to. I compiled years of financial statements, highlighting the sudden, massive withdrawals coinciding with my trip. I gathered character references from friends, colleagues, even the parents of my kids' friends who knew me as a coach and engaged father. I found receipts and booking confirmations showing Sarah had rented a storage unit 3 weeks before leaving. I tracked down the address she'd listed on the court filing, a new apartment leased under her name and, suspiciously, the name Gregory Miller. A quick, discreet online search confirmed Greg Miller was indeed a yoga instructor at the studio she joined. Further digging revealed his social media, which, while recently cleaned up, still had tagged photos from months earlier showing him and Sarah looking decidedly more than friendly at group events. The most crucial piece came from digging through archived joint phone records accessible online. Increased calls and texts between Sarah and a number I didn't recognize. Greg's number started 6 months prior, escalating significantly in the weeks before she left. The timing coincided perfectly with her increased secrecy and detachment. I wasn't just building a defense, I was uncovering the full, calculated betrayal step by step. She hadn't just fallen out of love, she had actively planned my financial ruin and removal from our children's lives to start a new life with someone else, funded by our shared assets. The anger simmered beneath the surface, but I channeled it into methodical preparation. Every document, every email, every statement was scanned, organized, annotated, and provided to Mr. Harrison. We were building our counteroffensive, not with fury, but with irrefutable truth. She expected a broken man. She was about to face a prepared one. The first court appearance was for the temporary orders hearing about 6 weeks after Sarah left, late November 2023. Sarah was there with her lawyer, looking composed but avoiding eye contact. Greg Miller sat in the back row, trying to look supportive. Seeing them together solidified my resolve. Sarah's lawyer presented her case first, painting me as the abusive, controlling husband and financially irresponsible figure she'd described in the petition. They requested temporary sole custody, exclusive use of the now empty marital funds she'd taken, substantial temporary alimony and child support, and a restraining order based on fabricated incidents. It was a polished performance of victimhood. Then it was Mr. Harrison's turn. He spoke calmly, methodically. He didn't raise his voice, he simply presented facts. He submitted my travel itineraries and work records confirming I was out of state when Sarah left. He showed the bank statements detailing the precise timing and amounts of the fund transfers, demonstrating they were systematically emptied just before the divorce filing. He presented the lease agreement for Sarah's new apartment, co-signed by Greg Miller, dated 2 weeks before she left me. He introduced the phone records showing the escalating contact between Sarah and Greg over the preceding months. He refuted the abuse allegations with emails and texts between Sarah and me from the weeks leading up to her departure, showing normal, even affectionate, communication from her end, completely contradicting the claims of fear or abuse. He presented my sworn financial affidavit, accurately reflecting my current state of near-zero liquidity, directly caused by Sarah's actions. He requested immediate joint temporary custody, arguing there was no evidence whatsoever to support denying me access to my children. He asked for a court order freezing the transferred funds pending a full financial accounting and equitable distribution and requested only nominal temporary support given the circumstances. The judge, an experienced family court magistrate, listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. You could see the narrative Sarah's team had built begin to fray under the weight of documented evidence. Her lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Sarah herself seemed stunned, clearly not expecting such a detailed, factual rebuttal. The judge issued temporary orders that afternoon. No restraining order was granted due to lack of credible evidence. Temporary joint legal custody was ordered with a specific parenting time schedule granting me regular overnight visits with Emily and David starting immediately. The judge ordered Sarah to place $40,000 of the funds she took into an escrow account controlled by the court, pending final settlement, acknowledging the suspicious nature of the withdrawals. Temporary alimony and child support were set at a drastically reduced figure, reflecting my actual current ability to pay, not the inflated income Sarah claimed while simultaneously holding all the liquid assets. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a crucial first step. Sarah's initial shock-and-awe strategy had failed. The legal process ground on for months. Discovery involved exchanging detailed financial disclosures. Our requested forensic accountant meticulously traced the money Sarah had taken, identifying funds spent on deposits for her new apartment, furniture, and other personal expenses with Greg, clearly not solely for the children's needs. We deposed Sarah. Under oath, confronted with the phone records, the lease agreement, the timing of the bank withdrawals, her story began to crumble. She admitted the relationship with Greg started months before she left, contradicting her initial claims. She struggled to justify emptying the accounts. The allegations of abuse withered under cross-examination, revealed as exaggerations and outright falsehoods designed to gain leverage. We also had Emily and David speak with a court-appointed guardian ad litem (GL), a neutral third party representing the children's interests. Initially, the kids were distant, likely influenced by Sarah's narrative. But as they spent regular time with me again in my modest rented apartment, away from the immediate pressure, they started opening up. They missed their old life, they were confused, but they never expressed fear of me. David mentioned hearing arguments between Sarah and Greg about money. Emily, older and more perceptive, eventually told the GL she felt pressured by her mom to say negative things about me. The gal's report ultimately recommended joint custody, finding no evidence to support Sarah's claims of abuse or neglect and noting my historically active role as a parent. The final hearing took place almost a year after she left, in September 2024. Armed with the forensic accountant's report, the deposition transcripts, the gal's recommendation, and all the evidence we had meticulously gathered, Mr. Harrison presented our case for the final divorce decree. He didn't argue for revenge, he argued for fairness. He demonstrated Sarah's premeditated financial maneuvering and perjury regarding the abuse claims. He showed she had deliberately impoverished me to gain an unfair advantage. Sarah's lawyer attempted damage control, but the evidence was overwhelming. The final judgment was deeply satisfying, not because it punished Sarah, but because it reflected the truth. The court ordered an equitable distribution of marital assets, which meant I was credited back for half the money Sarah had taken before the split. Since she had already spent a significant portion, this amount was deducted from her share of other assets, primarily the equity in the marital home, which we agreed to sell, and her share of my retirement accounts. The false allegations were dismissed entirely. The court ordered permanent joint legal and physical custody, following the gal's recommendation for a standard shared parenting schedule. Alimony was awarded, but for a limited duration and at a significantly lower amount than she demanded, taking into account her actions and her cohabitation with Greg, who was also employed. Seeing the final judgment, reading the judge's findings that explicitly noted Sarah's lack of credibility and her calculated actions, felt like vindication. She hadn't expected me to fight back with calm, documented facts. She expected me to crumble or explode. Instead, I just presented the truth piece by piece until her fabricated reality collapsed. Justice wasn't loud or dramatic, it was the quiet, steady click of facts locking into place. Selling the house was bittersweet. It held 20 years of memories, good and bad. But closing the chapter felt necessary. After settling everything, paying off legal fees, and receiving my share of the assets, including the portion credited back from Sarah's initial haul, I wasn't rich, but I was stable again. More importantly, I wasn't penniless and powerless as Sarah had intended. I found a decent 3-bedroom apartment in a good school district, comfortable enough for me and for when the kids stayed over. Rebuilding my relationship with Emily and David was the most crucial part. The initial weeks after the temporary custody order were awkward. They were processing a lot, the separation, their mother's narrative, their own feelings. I didn't badmouth Sarah, I focused on being consistent, present, and honest with them in an age-appropriate way. We talked. I listened. I validated their confusion and hurt. Slowly, the walls came down. We found a new rhythm, homework, help at the kitchen table in the apartment, movie nights, eventually even joking around like we used to. Seeing them relax, seeing the trust return to their eyes was worth more than any financial settlement. They saw the difference between the fictional monster described in court papers and the father they actually knew. They still love their mother, as they should, but they understand this situation with more clarity now. They know the narrative they were initially fed wasn't the whole truth. Life is different now, quieter. I focus on work, my kids, and rebuilding my sense of self. The betrayal cut deep and the scars remain. Trusting someone fully again feels like a distant prospect. But the experience, paradoxically, also forged a strength I didn't know I possessed. Faced with utter devastation, I discovered a resilience rooted not in anger, but in methodical determination and a belief in truth. I learned that stability isn't just about finances or routine, it's also about inner fortitude. Sarah's plan failed because she underestimated my resolve and overestimated the power of her lies against documented facts. She sought to win through deception and aggression. I won by staying calm and relying on the truth. There's a quiet satisfaction in that. I don't rejoice in her struggles. I hear through the grapevine that things with Greg aren't perfect and managing finances is harder than she anticipated, but I feel a sense of equilibrium restored. Justice, in my case, wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my relationship with my children, and my financial stability from someone who tried to unjustly take it all. Looking back, I wouldn't wish this ordeal on anyone. It tests you to your core. But surviving it, fighting back intelligently, and coming out the other side with my integrity and my children's love intact has given me a foundation for a new beginning. It's a quieter, more cautious life, perhaps, but it's mine, rebuilt on the solid ground of truth. And that, I've learned, is a stability no one can take away.